The attic smelled of cedar and forgotten time. Olivia Bennett stood on the third rung of the ladder, her breath forming small clouds in the December cold that seeped through the roof tiles. Below her, the warmth of her childhood home glowed softly Christmas lights. Her mother had strung too early the scent of cinnamon and pine drifting up through the open hatch. Above her, shadows and dust motes danced in the beam of her phone's flashlight. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not tonight. Tonight was supposed to be different. Nathan had texted 3 times in the past hour, casual messages that felt anything but casual. Still at your mom's and no rush, just wondering. And finally, I'll be at the harbor when you're done. Our spot, their spot. The bench overlooking Boston Harbor, where they'd had their first real conversation 7 years ago. Where he'd kissed her for the first time under a January snowfall. Where he'd told her on their 5th anniversary that he could wait as long as she needed. Olivia's hand trembled slightly as she pushed aside a box of her father's old law books. She knew what tonight was, had seen it in the careful way Nathan had dressed that morning, in the cologne he only wore for important occasions, in the way he'd kissed her forehead and lingered there as if memorizing the moment. He was going to ask, and she didn't know if she could say yes. The thought made her stomach twist, made her climb higher into the attic when she should have been driving to the harbor. Made her search for her mother's old things, though she couldn't have explained why, if anyone asked. Her fingers found the edge of a leather journal, cracked and soft with age. It had fallen behind a trunk of winter clothes, hidden in a way that felt intentional. Olivia pulled it free, and dust scattered like snow in the flashlight beam. The first page was dated April 1978. Her mother's handwriting, younger, rounder than the neat script Olivia knew. Michael came to the library again today, 3rd time this week. He doesn't even pretend to look at books anymore. Olivia's chest tightened. Michael. She'd never heard her mother mention that name. She flipped through pages quickly, her eyes catching on fragments. Told him I can't, and Richard asked me to dinner, but all I can think about is, and I'm late. God, I'm so late, and I don't know what to. Then in handwriting that looked pressed so hard, it nearly tore the paper. I lost the baby today. Michael doesn't know I was pregnant. I'll never tell him. Richard proposed last night, and I said yes because I can't bear the thought of being alone with this grief. I'm choosing safety over love, and maybe that makes me a coward, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep wanting someone who wants to save the world more than he wants to build a life with me. Michael Pierce is leaving for Doctors Without Borders next month. He'll never know he almost had a child. The journal slipped from Olivia's hands, landing on the wooden floor with a sound that seemed too loud for the small space. Pierce. Nathan Pierce. The attic spun slightly. Olivia gripped the ladder, her mind racing through connections she'd never thought to make. Nathan's father had died when he was 12, she knew that. Knew it had shaped Nathan into the careful, protective man he was. Knew he rarely spoke about it, except to say his father had been a doctor, had believed in service above all else. Had he known? Did Nathan know that they're mothers? Her phone buzzed. Nathan, getting cold out here, you okay? Olivia stared at the message. At the ring box she was certain he had in his pocket. At the life he was offering, the life she'd been running from, even as she loved him with a fierceness that sometimes frightened her. She climbed down from the attic, carefully, the journal clutched against her chest. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming along to Bing Crosby, arranging cookies on a plate. Catherine Bennett, at 63, was still beautiful, still composed, still every inch the judge's wife she'd been for 40 years. Did you find the ornaments? Catherine asked without turning around. No, Olivia's voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. Mom, who was Michael Pierce? The humming stopped. Catherine's hands stilled on the cookie plate. For a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly she turned. Her eyes found the journal in Olivia's hands, and something in her face crumbled, just for a second, just long enough for Olivia to see the girl her mother had been, the girl who'd loved someone else before choosing safety. Where did you find that? In the attic, behind the trunk. Olivia set the journal on the counter between them. Was he Nathan's father? Catherine's breath left her in a rush. She pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily as if her legs could no longer hold her. You weren't supposed to. I thought I'd thrown that away. Was he? Yes. The word was barely a whisper. Michael Pierce. We met in college. I was studying literature. He was pre-med. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. He was brilliant and passionate and completely impossible. He wanted to change the world. I wanted a home stability, a family. We wanted different lives. You were pregnant with his child. Catherine's eyes closed. For 8 weeks. I didn't tell him because I knew what he would do. He would have stayed, given up Doctors Without Borders, resented me eventually. Or he would have asked me to come with him, and I couldn't. I couldn't live that life. Her voice broke. I lost the baby before I had to make that choice, and I met your father 2 months later. Does Dad know? No. Well, Catherine looked up, her eyes fierce now. Your father loves me, has loved me for 40 years. He gave me everything I asked for: stability, security, a beautiful life. I chose him knowing exactly what I was doing. I don't regret it. But her mother's hands were shaking. Olivia thought of Nathan waiting at the harbor, thought of the ring box and the questions she wasn't ready to answer, thought of her mother sitting in this same kitchen 40 years ago, choosing the safe path over the uncertain one. Did you ever see Michael again? Once, 15 years ago. He came back to Boston, was working at Children's Hospital. We ran into each other at a medical fundraiser. He'd just lost his wife to cancer, had a son about your age. Catherine's voice went soft. He looked at me like no time had passed at all, like he could still see the girl I'd been. And for just a moment, I wondered what my life would have been like if I'd been braver. The kitchen was too quiet. Outside, carolers were singing on the street, their voices muffled by the falling snow that had started an hour ago. Nathan is Michael's son, Olivia said. It wasn't a question. Catherine nodded. I didn't know at first, not until you brought him home for Thanksgiving 3 years ago and mentioned his father had worked for Doctors Without Borders. Then I saw the photo you showed me, Michael, at Nathan's medical school graduation. It was him. Older, but unmistakably him. She reached across the table. Olivia, this doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Olivia pulled her hand back. Nathan and I, we're not some cosmic destiny. We're just two people trying to fill the holes our parents left. That's not true. Isn't it? You chose Dad because you were scared. I'm with Nathan because I'm terrified of becoming you, of choosing wrong and spending 40 years wondering what if. Olivia's voice cracked. He's waiting for me right now at the harbor. And I know he has a ring, and I know he's going to ask, and I don't know if I can say yes, because every time I think about forever, all I can see is you and Dad in separate rooms living parallel lives that never quite touch. Catherine's face went pale. Your father and I are happy. Are you, Olivia asked softly, or are you safe? The question hung between them like the snow falling outside, soft and cold, and impossible to take back. Catherine stood abruptly, turned back to the counter, began arranging cookies with hands that trembled. You should go. Nathan's waiting. Olivia picked up the journal, held it for a moment, then set it back down on the counter. Did Michael ever know about the baby? No. Catherine's voice was barely audible. Some things are kinder left unsaid. The harbor was frozen at the edges, ice creeping toward the center in patterns that looked like reaching hands. Nathan stood at their bench, his coat dusted with snow, his breath forming clouds in the December air. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and the smile that crossed his face was so full of love that Olivia nearly ran back to her car. Hey. He pulled her close, and she let herself sink into his warmth for a moment, breathing in the scent of him, coffee and soap and that cologne that meant tonight. Hey. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. Nathan pulled back slightly, studied her face. 7 years together meant he could read her silences better than most people could read words. What's wrong? Nothing, my mom and I were talking and I lost track of time. He didn't believe her. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the careful, neutral expression he wore when he was hurt, but didn't want to show it. But he nodded, sat down on the bench, pulled her down beside him. They sat in silence for a while, watching the boats bob in their slips, watching the city lights reflect off the dark water. Nathan's hand found hers, his fingers warm despite the cold. I was going to do this differently, he said finally. Had a whole thing planned. Dinner at Menton, champagne the works. He laughed softly. But sitting here with you in the cold feels more honest somehow, more us. Olivia's heart was hammering. Nathan. Wait, let me. He turned to face her, and she saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she felt. 7 years ago, I came to this bench alone. I'd just finished a brutal 72-hour shift, lost a patient, a little girl leukemia, and I was questioning everything. Why I'd become a doctor, whether I was strong enough for it, whether I'd ever be able to save anyone that mattered. He'd never told her this. In 7 years, he'd never mentioned being here alone. Then I heard someone crying. You were sitting 3 benches down and you were trying so hard not to make any noise, but I could see your shoulders shaking. And I thought, that's someone else who's questioning everything tonight. Nathan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. I almost didn't come over. Almost walked away because what right did I have to intrude on a stranger's grief, but something made me stay. Olivia remembered that night, remembered the man who'd sat down beside her and said nothing, just offered her his scarf because she was shivering. Remembered how he'd waited until she was ready to talk, and how when she finally did told him about the promotion she'd turned down because she was terrified of failing, about the architecture career she'd built on playing it safe, he'd listened like her words mattered. You told me that fear was just love protecting itself, she said softly. That being scared meant I cared enough to worry about the outcome. I was 24 and full of shit. Nathan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. But I meant it, and I mean this, Olivia, you are the bravest person I know. Not because you're fearless, but because you feel everything so deeply and you still show up. You still try to. He reached into his pocket and Olivia's breath caught. I don't want to pressure you. God, the last thing I want is for you to feel trapped. But I need you to know, his hand stilled on whatever was in his pocket. He was looking at her face, reading the panic she was trying to hide. I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere, whether you're ready for this or not. Whether it takes another 7 years or 70, I'm here. He pulled his hand out of his pocket. Empty. No ring box, no question. The relief that flooded through Olivia was immediately followed by guilt so sharp it felt like a physical pain. Nathan saw it, saw everything. He always did. You found something today, he said quietly. At your mom's. Something that scared you. Nathan, it's okay. He stood up, pulled her to her feet. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We always do. He kissed her forehead, that same lingering kiss from this morning, and Olivia felt tears sting her eyes. Come on, let's get you home. It's freezing out here. They walked back to the parking lot in silence, and when Nathan opened her car door for her, Olivia caught his wrist. I love you. I know. He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. I love you too. That's not the part we're struggling with. She drove home with tears blurring her vision, with her mother's journal burning a hole in her mind, with the image of Nathan's empty hands seared behind her eyelids. The community center was chaos. Olivia stood in the middle of what would eventually be a therapy wing, surrounded by contractors arguing about load-bearing walls, electricians debating outlet placement, and her assistant Marcus frantically waving paint samples that all looked identical in the December light streaming through the unfinished windows. The Lawson wing is a week behind schedule, Marcus said, his tablet balanced on a stack of 2x4s. Dr. Lawson wants to know if we can expedite the soundproofing installation. Olivia rubbed her temples. 3 days since that night at the harbor. 3 days of Nathan being carefully, painfully normal. 3 days of her mother's journal sitting on her nightstand unread beyond those first devastating pages. 3 days of her designing and redesigning the center's community spaces, like if she could just get the angles right, everything else would fall into place. Tell Dr. Lawson I'll meet with her this afternoon to discuss the timeline. Olivia turned to the nearest contractor. And can someone please explain to me why the therapy rooms are suddenly 6 inches narrower than the approved plans? Building code revision, the contractor said, not looking up from his clipboard. Came through last month. We're compliant, but it means some of the interior walls need to shift. Olivia wanted to scream. Instead, she pulled out her own tablet, began sketching adjustments on the fly. The community center had been her passion project for 2 years, a space for families in crisis with therapy wings, community gathering spaces, a children's library. The kind of place that could have helped her family, maybe if it had existed 30 years ago when her parents' marriage was quietly fracturing. Ms. Bennett, Olivia looked up. A woman stood in the doorway of what would become the main therapy office, silhouetted against the bright winter light. Tall, sharp-featured, with silver hair, cut in a precise bob, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Dr. Lawson, Olivia crossed the room, stepping over power tools and stacks of drywall. I was just about to come find you. I heard. Grace Lawson stepped into the unfinished room, her heels clicking on the concrete subfloor. I also heard you've been here since 6 this morning. That's the third time this week. Olivia stiffened. The project is behind schedule. I'm just trying to run from something. Grace's voice was kind, but her gaze was uncomfortably direct. I've been a therapist for 23 years, Ms. Bennett. I know avoidance when I see it. I'm not your patient, Dr. Lawson. No, but you're designing a space for healing while actively avoiding your own. Grace moved to the window, looked out at the Boston skyline etched against the December sky. This room, the main therapy office, it's beautiful. High ceilings, natural light, carefully positioned, so clients can see the city, but not feel overwhelmed by it. You've thought about trauma-informed design, about creating safety. She turned back to Olivia. But you've designed all the therapy rooms to be windowless. It's for privacy. Soundproofing is easier. It's because you don't want to see a way out. Grace's words were quiet, but they landed like stones in still water. When people are in pain, you want them to have to sit with it, fully present, unable to escape through a window to somewhere else, just like you're doing right now. Olivia felt her throat tighten. You don't know anything about me. I know you're engaged to Dr. Nathan Pierce. I know he's been a volunteer at Children's Hospital for 6 years and has a reputation for being unfailingly patient and kind. I know your mother is Judge Catherine Bennett and your father is Richard Bennett of Bennett and Associates. Grace paused. And I know you're standing in an unfinished therapy wing at 9 in the morning on a Saturday 3 days before Christmas instead of being with the man you supposedly love. How do you know I'm engaged? I'm not even... Olivia stopped. Grace's expression softened. You're not, but he's asked or is about to, and you're terrified. Olivia turned away, stared at the wall that would eventually hold certificates and calming artwork and all the trappings of professional help. I found out my mother was in love with someone else before she married my father. Someone who turned out to be Nathan's father. The words came out flat. So now I don't know if what Nathan and I have is real or if we're just acting out our parents' unfinished story. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its clinical edge. My husband died 8 years ago. Car accident. We'd been married for 15 years, had a daughter together. She was 12 when he died. She moved to stand beside Olivia, both of them looking at the same blank wall. For a year after I couldn't work, couldn't see patients. Because every couple that came to me, every person struggling with loss or fear or the inability to move forward reminded me that I'd failed at the one thing I was supposed to be good at, holding a relationship together. Olivia glanced at her. Grace's face was composed, but there was something raw beneath it. I thought my husband and I were happy, Grace continued. Thought we'd built something solid. Then after he died, I found emails. He'd been planning to leave me, had been for months. Was waiting until our daughter graduated high school. She smiled, but it was edged with old pain. Turns out I'd been living in a marriage that was already over, too afraid to see the truth. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me something important. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's safety. Grace turned to face Olivia fully. Your mother chose safety over love. It's why you're so afraid to choose it all. Because you've seen what safety looks like, and it looks like 40 years of wondering, what if? Olivia's eyes burned. So what do I do? You stop designing windowless rooms. Grace's voice was gentle. You let yourself imagine an escape route, and then you choose whether or not to take it, not because you're scared, but because you've looked at all the options and decided what you actually want. And if I don't know what I want, then you start by asking yourself what you're really afraid of. Grace pulled a business card from her purse, handed it to Olivia. I'm not taking patients right now, not officially, but if you need to talk off the record, my number's on the back. She left, her footsteps fading down the unfinished hallway. Olivia stood alone in the empty therapy room, holding a business card from a woman who just peeled back layers of her psyche in under 10 minutes. She pulled out her phone, stared at the text thread with Nathan. The last message was from him, sent this morning, heading into a double shift. See you tomorrow, she'd meant to respond. Had typed and deleted 3 different versions of miss you and can we talk and I'm sorry I'm like this. Instead, she opened her photos, scrolled to the album marked Us. 7 years of images, Nathan at her graduate school commencement. His pride so obvious it made her chest ache. Olivia covered in paint after her first gallery showing Nathan in the background, setting up champagne. The two of them at his father's grave 3 years ago, Nathan's hand gripping hers so tightly she'd lost circulation. Last New Year's Eve, both of them exhausted from respective work disasters, eating Chinese takeout on her apartment floor at 3 in the morning and laughing at nothing. Her thumb hovered over the most recent photo from last week. Nathan asleep on her couch, a pediatrics textbook open on his chest, his face soft in the lamplight. She'd taken the photo because she'd looked at him and thought with sudden clarity, this is the person I want to find me when I'm lost. And then 3 days later, she'd found her mother's journal and everything had shifted. Olivia dialed his number before she could stop herself. He answered on the second ring, slightly breathless. Hey, everything okay? I need to tell you something. The words rushed out. About my mom and your dad and us. There was a pause. Then, okay, I'm at the hospital until 7, but I can come over after, or we could meet somewhere. My place, I'll make dinner. Olivia, his voice was careful. You don't have to make dinner. You don't have to do anything except talk to me. I know, she closed her eyes, but I want to. I need to do something with my hands while I say this. Then I'll be there at 7:30. Another pause. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. You know that, right? Did she? Olivia wasn't sure what she knew anymore. 7:30, she confirmed and ended the call before the tears in her voice became obvious. She spent the rest of the afternoon redesigning the therapy wing. Added windows to every room, large ones positioned to catch the afternoon light, to give clients a view of the city and the sky and the world continuing beyond their pain. Grace was right. She'd been designing cages. Maybe it was time to start designing doors instead. Nathan arrived at 7:28. Olivia had been watching the clock, watching the pasta water boil, watching her hands shake as she set the table for two. Her mother's journal sat on the kitchen counter, a presence she couldn't ignore. When the doorbell rang, she considered not answering. Considered letting the moment pass, the conversation remain unspoken, the truth stay buried like it had been for 40 years in her mother's attic. Instead, she opened the door. Nathan stood in the hallway, snowflakes melting in his dark hair, his doctor's bag slung over one shoulder. He was still in his scrubs under his coat, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of the double shift he'd just finished. But when he saw her face, saw whatever devastation was written there, he dropped his bag and pulled her into his arms without a word. Olivia held on, breathed him in, felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, and wondered how many more times she'd feel it before everything changed. Hey, he said, finally pulling back just enough to see her face. Hi. Hi. She stepped back, let him in. Dinner's almost ready. Forget dinner. Nathan followed her to the kitchen, caught her hand before she could reach for the pasta pot. Talk to me first. So she did. She told him about finding the journal, about the baby her mother had lost, about Michael Pierce and Catherine Bennett, and a love that had ended before it could begin. She told him about sitting in the attic, connecting dots that she'd never known existed, realizing that their love story might be nothing more than an echo of their parents' unfinished one. Nathan listened without interrupting, his hand steady in hers, his face unreadable in the dim kitchen light. When she finished, the silence was so heavy, Olivia could barely breathe beneath it. Did you know, she asked finally, about our parents? Nathan's jaw tightened. He pulled his hand away, leaned against the counter, looked at the journal sitting between them like a bomb. Yes. The word was a punch to the gut. How long? 3 years, his voice was raw. My dad told me before he died. He made me promise not to tell anyone, especially not your mother. He said she'd made her choice and he had to respect that. That he'd spent 30 years wishing things had been different, but ultimately, she'd been right. They'd wanted different lives. 3 years, Olivia's voice broke. We've been together for 7, and you've known for 3 that our parents... I know. Nathan looked at her and there was so much pain in his eyes that she almost went to him. Almost. I know how it sounds, but Liv, I swear to God, it didn't change anything for me. You were never your mother's second choice. You were always my first. How can I believe that? How can either of us trust that what we feel is real and not just, she gestured helplessly, some kind of cosmic do-over for them? Because I felt it before I knew. Nathan pushed off the counter cross to her. That night at the harbor, 7 years ago, when I saw you crying, I didn't know your last name, didn't know who your parents were. I just knew that you were someone I wanted to understand. And every day since then, I've chosen you. Not because of our parents' history, but in spite of it. You should have told me. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. God, Liv, I know. But I was terrified that if you knew, you'd do exactly what you're doing right now, questioning everything, looking for reasons why we shouldn't be together instead of reasons why we should. Maybe I need reasons why we shouldn't. The words came out harsher than she meant them. Maybe I need to know that this is a choice, not a destiny someone else wrote for us. Nathan's face went very still. Is that what you think this is? You think I'm with you because my dad loved your mom? I don't know. Olivia's voice cracked. I don't know anything anymore. 3 days ago, I knew exactly who we were. I knew that you were the person who made me feel safe and seen and loved. I knew that I wanted to spend my life with you, even though the thought of marriage terrified me. And now you're looking for an exit. Nathan's voice was quiet. That's what this is really about, isn't it? It's not about our parents. It's about you finding a reason to run before I can ask you to stay. The truth of it hit her like cold water. I saw you that night, she whispered. At the harbor. I saw the look on your face and I knew you were going to propose. And I panicked. I went up to my mom's attic looking for a reason to say no, and I found one. Nathan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. So what now? Where does that leave us? Olivia looked at the man she loved, at 7 years of carefully built trust and slowly opened hearts, at the future she wanted and the fear that kept her from reaching for it. I don't know, she said honestly. I just know I can't say yes to you, not yet, until I figure out if I'm saying yes to us or yes to a story that was never ours to begin with. Nathan nodded slowly. He picked up his bag from where he dropped it by the door. Okay, then take your time. Figure it out. I'll be here when you do. He paused at the door, looked back at her. But Liv, just so you know, I wasn't going to propose that night. I was going to tell you about Seattle. Her heart stopped. Seattle? I got a job offer. Head of pediatric oncology at Seattle Children's. It's everything I've been working toward. His smile was sad. I turned it down. Didn't even tell you about it because I knew what you'd say, that I should take it, that I shouldn't give up my dreams for you. But the truth is, Boston stopped being about the Boston years ago. It's about you. It's always been about you. He left and Olivia stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the dinner she'd cooked and the words she couldn't take back, and the terrible crystal clear understanding that she'd just hurt the person who'd spent 7 years making sure she never felt pain. Outside, snow began to fall harder, covering the city, in white, covering her windows, covering the world, until all she could see was her own reflection, staring back, afraid and alone, and exactly where she'd chosen to be. The pasta water boiled over, hissing on the stove. Olivia turned off the heat and cried. The silence in Olivia's apartment lasted 3 days. Not complete silence, the radiator still hissed. The refrigerator hummed the city outside her. Windows continued its relentless noise. But the silence that mattered, the one that filled the space where Nathan's voice should have been, was absolute. He didn't call, didn't text, gave her exactly what she'd asked for: time and distance, and the freedom to figure out what she wanted without his presence influencing her choice. She hated him for it, hated herself more. On the fourth morning, December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, Olivia woke to find 6 inches of fresh snow coating the city and a voicemail from her mother that she'd missed at 2 a.m. Olivia, honey, Catherine's voice was thin, strained. I know you're angry with me. You have every right to be. But I need to explain some things, and I'd rather do it in person. Can you come by tomorrow? Your father will be at the firm all day. A pause filled with something that sounded like tears held back by sheer will. Please, there's more to the story than what was in that journal. Olivia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the morning light shift across the plaster. Her phone sat heavy in her hand. She could delete the voicemail, pretend she hadn't heard it, continue designing windowless rooms and avoiding the truth about her family, about Nathan, about the way fear had wrapped itself around her heart so tightly she could barely breathe. Or she could go, could listen. could stop running long enough to understand what she was running from. She called Grace Lawson at 9 a.m. "Miss Bennett." Grace's voice was warm but unsurprised, as if she'd been expecting this call. "How can I help? You said if I needed to talk off the record." Olivia's throat tightened. "I need to talk." "Where are you, Guyan?" "Home, South End. There's a coffee shop on Tremont near Berkeley. Pavement Coffee House. Can you be there in an hour?" Olivia looked at her apartment, at the cold pasta still sitting on the stove from 4 nights ago, at Nathan's forgotten scarf draped over the back of the couch, at the journal she'd been reading and rereading, until the words blurred together. "Yes." "Good. I'll see you there." Pavement Coffee House was warm and crowded, filled with the kind of people who had their lives together enough to venture out in a snowstorm for overpriced lattes. Grace sat in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee already on the table, her sharp gaze tracking Olivia's approach. "You look terrible," Grace said without preamble. "Thank you, that's very therapeutic." A ghost of a smile crossed Grace's face. "Therapy starts with honesty. You look like you haven't slept in days, and you're wearing what I'm guessing is your boyfriend's sweater." She gestured at the oversized MIT medical school hoodie Olivia had thrown on without thinking. "So, what happened?" Olivia sat down, wrapped her hands around the coffee cup Grace pushed toward her. "I told him about our parents, about the journal." She stared into the dark liquid. He already knew, had known for 3 years. And instead of being angry at him for hiding it, I used it as proof that we're just acting out our parents' story. Then I pushed him away. Classic self-sabotage. Grace's tone was clinical, detached. "You found evidence that your fear might be justified, so you used it as a weapon before he could use it against you." "That's," Olivia stopped, "because it was true." "Yes. And now you're sitting in a coffee shop at 10 in the morning wearing his clothes looking for someone to tell you how to fix it." "I don't know if I want to fix it." The words hurt coming out. "What if he's right? What if I'm just looking for an exit?" Grace took a slow sip of her coffee. "Tell me about your parents' marriage. Not what you think you know from the journal. What you actually experienced growing up." Olivia blinked at the shift in topic. "They were fine. Stable. Dad worked a lot. Mom was always there for me. School events, recitals, everything. They had dinner together every night, went to church on Sundays. From the outside, they probably looked perfect." "From the outside." Grace's eyes were sharp. "What about from the inside?" The question opened something in Olivia's chest, some locked room she'd been avoiding for 30 years. "They never fought, never argued, never raised their voices, which sounds good except," she trailed off. "Except it meant they never really talked either," Grace finished quietly. "Yes." Olivia's voice was barely audible. "They existed in parallel. Mom would ask Dad about his day, and he'd give these surface-level answers, fine, busy. The Henderson case is complicated. She'd talk about her book club or the garden, and he'd nod in the right places. But she struggled to find the words. They never seemed to actually end each other, like they were following a script of what a marriage should look like without ever questioning if it was what they actually wanted." "And you grew up watching this performance," Grace said, "watching your mother maintain the perfect home, the perfect life, while something essential in her slowly died. No wonder you're terrified of marriage. You've spent 3 decades watching what happens when someone chooses safety over authenticity." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "She called me last night, asked me to come over. Said there's more to the story than what's in the journal." "Are you going to go?" "I don't know." Olivia looked up. "What if I don't want to know more? What if the not knowing is easier?" Grace set down her coffee cup, leaned forward. "Let me tell you about my husband, Thomas. We met in grad school. I was getting my doctorate in psychology. He was in business. We were both ambitious, both driven, both absolutely certain we knew what we wanted from life." Her voice went soft. "We got married 6 months after we met, had our daughter Lily a year later. Built a beautiful house in Brookline, had careers we loved. From the outside, we looked perfect. But from the inside, from the inside, we were strangers who shared a zip code." Grace's hands tightened around her cup. "Thomas traveled constantly for work. I was building my practice. Lily was raised by nannies and after-school programs. We told ourselves we were giving her everything, the best schools, the best opportunities. What we were actually giving her was two parents who were too busy performing success to notice she was drowning. Olivia's breath caught. What happened? She tried to kill herself. The words were flat clinical. 15 years old, straight-A student captain of the debate team. Perfect on the outside, falling apart on the inside, just like her parents. Grace's eyes were distant, seeing something years past. I found her in the bathroom. Pills. She'd taken half a bottle of sleeping medication and left a note that said, "Maybe if I'm gone, you'll finally have time to look at each other." Oh my God. She survived. Grace's voice cracked slightly. 2 days in the ICU, a week in psychiatric care, and 3 years of intensive therapy. And Thomas and I finally had to look at what we'd built, this beautiful hollow performance of a life. She met Olivia's eyes. He told me he wanted a divorce, that he'd been unhappy for years but stayed for Lily, that he'd met someone else, someone who actually saw him, and he couldn't keep pretending anymore. When did he die? A week before he was supposed to move out. Grace's laugh was bitter. Car accident on his way home from his lawyer's office. Sudden, clean, meaningless. And I never got to tell him that I'd been pretending too, that I'd known about the affair for months and was relieved because it meant I wouldn't have to be the one to leave. She paused. I never got to tell him I was sorry. Sorry for building a life where we were so afraid of being vulnerable that we forgot how to be real. The coffee shop noise faded into background static. Olivia stared at this woman who looked so composed, so together, and saw the cracks beneath the surface. Your daughter, Olivia said finally. Is she? She's 23 now, pre-med at Johns Hopkins, calls me every Sunday. We're not perfect, but we're honest with each other in ways Thomas and I never were. Grace's smile was sad. The attempt was her rock bottom, but it was also her way of forcing us to stop performing and start feeling. Sometimes the only way out of a hollow life is to shatter it completely. Olivia thought of Nathan, of the way she'd shattered them 4 nights ago. So what do I do? How do I know if what I feel for Nathan is real or just me being terrified of ending up like my parents? You go talk to your mother. Grace's voice was firm. You listen to the rest of her story, and then you decide if you're brave enough to choose differently than she did, or if you're going to spend the next 40 years playing it safe and calling it love. Catherine Bennett's house looked like a Christmas card white colonial, with black shutters, wreath on the door lights, strung perfectly along the roofline. Olivia sat in her car across the street, engine running, heat blasting, trying to find the courage to walk inside. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Dr. Lawson approved the window changes. Says the therapy wing looks like it finally has a soul, whatever that means. Also, where are you meeting with the mayor's office in 20? Olivia stared at the message. Right, the mayor's office. The final approval for the community center's opening ceremony scheduled for New Year's Day. The biggest professional moment of her career, and she'd completely forgotten about it. She texted back, handle it without me. Emergency. Then before Marcus could respond, she turned off her phone. The front door opened before she could knock. Catherine stood there, wrapped in a cardigan, despite the heated house looking older than Olivia had ever seen her. Smaller somehow, as if confession had diminished her. Thank you for coming. Catherine stepped back, let Olivia enter. The house smelled like sugar cookies and pine, like every Christmas of Olivia's childhood. It made her want to cry. They sat in the living room, not the formal one with the antique furniture, but the smaller den where Catherine kept her books and her reading chair. The room where she'd hidden from Richard's silence for 40 years. I've been thinking about what to say to you since the night you found that journal, Catherine began, trying to find the right words, the right explanation. But I keep coming back to the same truth. There isn't a right way to say this. There's just the truth. Olivia waited. Catherine picked up a photo from the side table, young Catherine and young Michael, college students laughing at something off camera. We met in October of my sophomore year. He was a senior pre-med, already planning to change the world. I was studying literature and dreaming of being a novelist. She smiled at the memory. He used to say I saw beauty in words the way he saw it in the human body, as something miraculous and fragile and worth protecting. What happened? Life happened. His life, my life, two completely different trajectories that briefly intersected. Catherine set down the photo. By my senior year, we'd been together almost 3 years. Everyone assumed we'd get married. I assumed it too until Michael got accepted into Doctors Without Borders. He wanted me to come with him to Africa, to South America, to wherever they needed him. Said we could get married, have adventures, see the world. And you said no. I said I needed time to think. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. But what I really meant was no. Because I'd grown up in a chaotic household. My father was an alcoholic. My mother worked 3 jobs. We never knew if there'd be food on the table or if Dad would be passed out on the couch. I'd spent my whole childhood craving stability, safety, a life where I could predict tomorrow. Her voice broke. Michael was offering me excitement in uncertainty and a life without roots. Everything I'd spent 20 years running from. Olivia felt something shift in her chest. She'd never known about her grandparents, about the childhood her mother had escaped. Catherine rarely talked about her family, always deflected questions with vague answers about them being complicated. I broke up with him. Catherine continued, told him I couldn't live that life, that I needed something different. He left for Africa 2 weeks later. She looked at Olivia, her eyes bright with tears. I thought I'd handled it well. Thought I'd made the mature, practical choice. Then I found out I was pregnant. Did you tell him? I tried. Called the Doctors Without Borders office, left messages, tried to reach him through friends. But he was in a remote village in Kenya. No phone service, mail took months to arrive. And I was 21 and terrified and alone. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. I miscarried at 10 weeks. Spontaneous abortion, the doctors called it. Nature's way of saying mommy thing wasn't viable. But all I heard was that I'd lost the last piece of Michael and he would never even know it existed. The room was too warm. Olivia pulled off her coat, but the weight in her chest remained. Richard asked me out 3 weeks later. He was a young associate at his father's law firm, stable and kind and completely unexciting. He took me to nice restaurants, sent flowers, talked about building a life in Boston, about children and family and forever. Catherine wiped her eyes. I said yes to his proposal because I was grieving and scared and desperate for someone to tell me everything would be okay. I thought if I could just build a safe life, the pain would eventually fade. Did it? No, the word was stark. I built a beautiful cage and spent 40 years to pretending I'd chosen it. Richard is a good man, Olivia. He's been faithful and present and everything a husband should be. But he's not. Catherine stopped struggling. He's not the person I would have chosen if I hadn't been so afraid of choosing wrong. Olivia felt like she was seeing her mother for the first time. Not the composed judge's wife, not the perfect suburban mother, but the scared 21-year-old girl who traded passion for predictability and spent 4 decades paying the price. When did you see Michael again? 15 years ago at that fundraiser. Catherine's eyes went distant. He'd just lost his wife to cancer, was raising Nathan alone. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, polite surface-level conversation. But at the end, he looked at me and said, I would have come back for you. If you'd told me about the baby, I would have given up everything and come back. And I realized he'd known. Somehow he'd known. How? Your father told him. The words fell like stones. Years later, when Michael came to Boston to work at Children's Hospital, he and Richard ran into each other at some legal medical conference. Richard, drunk and guilty about something I've never understood, told Michael about the pregnancy, about me, about everything I'd kept hidden. Catherine's face crumpled. Richard knew, has known for 15 years, and neither of them ever told me they knew. Olivia's mind was reeling. Dad knew about Michael all this time. Yes, and he stayed silent, kept the secret because... Catherine laughed bitterly, because telling me would have meant acknowledging that our marriage was built on my grief for another man. So we've all been living this elaborate lie, me pretending I chose Richard, Richard pretending he doesn't know I settled, Michael raising his son alone knowing he almost had a different life. And Nathan, Olivia's voice was rough. When did he learn about all of this? 3 years ago, apparently. Michael told him before he died, made him promise not to tell anyone. Catherine looked at Olivia directly. That boy has been carrying your family's secrets for 3 years, loving you through all of it, and you pushed him away the moment you learned the truth. The accusation stung because it was accurate. I didn't, Olivia started, then stopped. I don't know how to trust that what we have is real. How do I know he didn't choose me because of some misguided idea about finishing what you and his father started? Because he chose you before he knew who you were. Catherine's voice was fierce. You told me about that night at the harbor about the stranger who sat with you when you were crying. That was a year before he knew about Michael and me, wasn't it? Olivia nodded slowly. Then he chose you, the real you, the broken, scared, beautiful you, before our history ever entered the picture. And you're looking for reasons to disqualify that choice because you're terrified of ending up like me. Catherine reached across the space between them, gripped Olivia's hands. But here's the thing, sweetheart. You're already like me. You're so afraid of choosing wrong that you're choosing nothing at all. You're building the same cage I did, just with different bars. The truth of it hit Olivia like a physical blow. She pulled her hands back, stood up, walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the perfect lawn, the perfect neighborhood, the perfect lie. I don't know how to stop being afraid, she said quietly. You don't. Catherine came to stand beside her. The fear doesn't go away, Olivia. You just decide whether you're going to let it make your choices for you. She paused. I let fear choose for me 40 years ago, and I've regretted it every single day since. Don't make the same mistake. They stood together in silence, watching the snow fall, watching the world transform into something clean and new and temporarily beautiful. After a long moment, Olivia leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was a child. I'm sorry, Catherine whispered. I'm so sorry you had to grow up watching me be half alive. You deserved better than that. We all deserved better, Olivia said, and meant it. She drove aimlessly for an hour after leaving her mother's house, the city streets transformed by snow into something unfamiliar. She found herself at the community center without consciously deciding to go there, pulled into the parking lot by muscle memory and desperation. The building was dark locked. But Grace's car wasn't in the lot, a sleek black sedan covered in snow. Olivia found her in what would be the main therapy office, sitting on the concrete floor surrounded by paint samples, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. The contractors painted the wrong color, Grace said without looking up. I specified sage green calming grounding. They gave me seafoam, which is essentially just anxious green. Despite everything, Olivia laughed. It came out choked on the edge of tears, but it was a laugh. Anxious green, perfect. Grace looked up, studied Olivia's face. You talked to your mother. Yes. And I learned that my parents' marriage has been a 40-year performance. My father knew about the affair before I was born, and I'm apparently genetically predisposed to self-sabotage. Olivia slid down the wall, sat on the cold floor across from Grace. So that's fun, is it? Grace's voice was gentle. Fun, I mean. Knowing the truth. Olivia thought about it. About her mother's confession, about the weight of secrets finally spoken aloud, about the way truth, even painful truth, could feel like relief. It's better than not knowing, even if it hurts. That's progress. Grace set down the paint samples. Did your mother tell you why she stayed with your father after all these years? She said she chose safety over love and spent 40 years regretting it. And you heard that as a warning, Grace said. It wasn't a question. Heard her saying, don't make my mistake, don't choose the safe path. Isn't that what she was saying? Maybe. Grace stood, brushed concrete dust from her expensive slacks. Or maybe she was saying that staying in a marriage that wasn't working, that was the safe path. Maybe the brave choice would have been to leave, to admit the mistake and start over even after 40 years. She moved to the window, looked out at the snow-covered construction site. My husband wanted to leave me, was planning to before he died, and I spent 8 years feeling guilty that I was relieved by his death because it meant I didn't have to be the one to file for divorce. But you know what I've realized? What relief is its own kind of truth. If someone dying feels like freedom, then what you had wasn't worth mourning. Grace turned back to Olivia. Your mother has spent 40 years in a safe marriage that slowly suffocated her. You're spending 7 years in a relationship that terrifies you because it might actually be real. Those are very different problems. So what's the solution? You stop looking at your mother's life as a cautionary tale and start looking at it as a choice point. Grace's voice was firm. She chose safety and regretted it. Fine. But that doesn't mean choosing love is automatically the right answer either. The real question is, what do you actually want? Not what you think you should want, not what would make a good story, but what would make you happy. Olivia opened her mouth to answer, then realized she didn't know. Had never let herself really ask the question. For 7 years, she'd been reacting to Nathan, to his patience, his love, his steady presence, without ever stopping to ask what she wanted beyond her fear. I don't know, she said finally. Then figure it out. Grace pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. I just sent you my calendar. I'm free tomorrow afternoon. Come to my house, unofficial session off the record. We'll work through this properly instead of having half conversations in unfinished buildings. She paused. And bring Nathan's scarf, the one you've been carrying around like a security blanket. It's time to either give it back or admit why you're holding on to it. Olivia looked down. She hadn't realized she'd grabbed Nathan's scarf from her apartment, had it wrapped around her neck like armor. How did you? I've been doing this for 23 years, Grace said dryly. I noticed things. The snow had stopped by the time Olivia got back to her apartment. The city was quiet, muffled, everything covered in white that would turn to brown slush by morning. She trudged up the stairs to her third-floor walk-up, exhausted in a way that went bone deep. Nathan was sitting on her doorstep. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment they just stared at each other. He looked as wrecked as she felt, 5 days of stubble, dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Hi, he said quietly. Hi. Olivia's hands shook as she pulled out her keys. How long have you been here? 3 hours, maybe 4. He shrugged. I tried to stay away, give you space like you asked. But then I got a call from Marcus saying you'd missed the mayor's meeting, weren't answering your phone, and his voice cracked. I got scared, so I came to make sure you were okay, and then I couldn't bring myself to leave without seeing you. Olivia unlocked the door, held it open. Come in, you must be freezing. I'm fine. Nathan, come inside. He followed her in, and the apartment felt different with him in it, warmer, fuller, like it had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Olivia put on tea because she needed something to do with her hands, needed a reason not to look at him directly. I went to see my mother today. She set her back to him as she filled the kettle. She told me the whole story, about your father, about the baby, about how my dad knew all along. Nathan was silent. When she finally turned around, he was leaning against the counterarms, crossed that careful, neutral expression on his face that meant he was feeling everything and showing nothing. I'm sorry you had to hear all that, he said finally. Don't. The word came out sharper than she meant it. Don't apologize for my family's dysfunction. Don't apologize for secrets that aren't yours. She pressed her palms against the counter. Just tell me the truth. All of it. No more protected silences. Nathan's jaw tightened. What do you want to know? Why didn't you tell me 3 years, Nathan? 3 years you've known about our parents and you never said a word. Because I was terrified, he said simply. Terrified that if you knew you'd do exactly what you're doing now, questioning everything, looking for proof that what we have isn't real. He moved closer and Olivia could see the exhaustion etched into his face. My dad told me on his deathbed. Made me promise not to tell your mother, not to tell anyone. Said he'd spent 30 years carrying that secret, and he didn't want me to carry it alone, but he also didn't want to destroy your family. So you carried it instead. Yes, and I told myself it didn't matter because our history had nothing to do with theirs. You and I, we built this from nothing, Liv. From a chance meeting and 7 years of choosing each other every single day. His voice went rough. But I knew how you felt about your parents' marriage. Knew you saw it as a cautionary tale. And I was afraid that if you learned our parents almost had a different life together, you'd convince yourself that we were just completing their story. Aren't we? No. The word was fierce. We're not. Your mother and my father were young and scared and wanted different lives. You and I are two people who've spent 7 years learning how to be vulnerable with each other. That's not destiny or fate or cosmic completion, that's just love. Messy, complicated, real love. The kettle whistled, piercing and insistent. Olivia turned off the stove, poured hot water over tea bags, watching the water darken. You should have told me anyway. You're right, I should have. Nathan accepted the mug she handed him. But I was selfish. I wanted to protect what we had, even if it meant keeping secrets. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I made you feel like I was choosing you because of some predetermined narrative instead of because you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Olivia's eyes burned. She stared into her tea like it held answers. The Seattle job. Was that real? Yes, is real. They gave me until after the holidays to decide. He set down his mug. I turned it down today. Her head snapped up. What, Nathan? That's everything you've been working for. I know, and I chose you instead. His voice was steady. Not because I'm sacrificing my dreams, but because my dreams changed. Somewhere in the last 7 years, you became the dream live. You and whatever life we build together, wherever that is. You can't do that, Olivia said desperately. You can't just give up everything for me. Why not? Nathan moved closer and she could feel the heat of him, the solid presence of 7 years of steady love. You did the same thing. Turned down that position in New York 4 years ago, remember? Said you wanted to stay in Boston, to be close to your family. But we both knew it was really about us, about not wanting to start over somewhere new. That's different. It's not. He cupped her face and Olivia couldn't pull away, couldn't do anything but look at him. We've been choosing each other for 7 years, Liv. Sometimes big choices, sometimes small ones. And every single time, it's been because we wanted to, not because we had to. Not because of our parents' history or cosmic destiny or fear, just because we love each other and we're better together than apart. I don't know if I can do this, Olivia whispered. Marriage forever, all of it. What if I'm broken like my mother? What if I choose you and then spend the next 40 years regretting it? Then we'll deal with it together. Nathan's thumb traced her cheekbone. But Liv, you're not your mother. You're not choosing safety, you're running from it. You're so terrified of ending up in a safe, suffocating marriage that you're sabotaging a relationship that actually challenges you to be real. The truth hit her hard. Grace had said the same thing in different words. She wasn't trapped in her mother's story. She was so afraid of repeating it that she'd built her own cage. I don't know how to stop being afraid, she admitted. You don't have to stop. Nathan's forehead pressed against hers. Just don't let the fear decide everything. Let it have a voice, but not the only voice. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, not kissing, not speaking, just being together in the complicated mess of love and fear and truth. Finally, Olivia pulled back. I need time. Real time, not running away time. Time to figure out what I want separate from what I'm afraid of. Nathan nodded slowly. Okay. How much time? I don't know. Through the holidays at least. Maybe longer. And what does that mean for us? I don't know that either. Olivia's voice cracked. I just know I can't say yes to you until I'm sure I'm saying yes to us, not yes to an escape from my parents' marriage. Nathan picked up his coat from where he'd draped it over the back of her couch. At the door he paused, looked back. For what it's worth, I already know what I want. I've known for 7 years. So whenever you figure out what you want, I'll be waiting to hear it. He left, and Olivia stood in her apartment, surrounded by his absence, holding the mug of tea he'd barely touched. It was still warm. She thought about throwing it out, about washing the mug and putting it away and erasing this night like she'd erased so many other difficult moments. Instead, she carried it to the couch, sat down with Nathan's scarf still wrapped around her neck, and let herself cry. Outside, the city glowed with Christmas lights. Inside, Olivia finally let herself feel everything she'd been running, from the love, the fear, the grief, the hope. All of it tangled together, impossible to separate, impossible to deny. Tomorrow she'd go see Grace, would start figuring out what she wanted instead of what she was afraid of, would stop designing windowless rooms in her life and start building doors. But tonight she sat in the dark and held on to Nathan's warmth for just a little longer. Grace Lawson lived in a brownstone in Back Bay that somehow managed to feel both elegant and lived in. Olivia stood on the front steps on December 21st, clutching Nathan's scarf like a talisman, trying to find the courage to ring the bell. The door opened before she could decide. You've been standing there for 4 minutes, Grace said not unkindly. Come in before you freeze. Inside the house smelled like cinnamon and old books. Grace led her through a hallway lined with photos, A young Grace with a dark-haired man who must have been Thomas, a little girl with serious eyes, family portraits that tracked the years from happiness to performance to something that looked like relief. That's Lily, Grace said, noticing Olivia's gaze lingering on a recent photo of a young woman in a white coat. She's in her third year at Johns Hopkins, top of her class, calls me every Sunday like clockwork. A pause. We're learning how to be honest with each other. It's harder than you'd think. They settled in Grace's study, a room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace crackling with real wood, two leather chairs positioned to catch the winter light. It felt more like a library than a therapy office, which was probably the point. So, Grace said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea, tell me why you're really here. I thought we were having a session. We are, but this isn't about your parents anymore, is it? Or, Nathan, this is about you finally asking yourself what you actually want. Grace's gaze was steady. So I'll ask again, why are you here? Olivia looked down at the scarf in her hands. Nathan's scarf still smelling faintly of him, coffee, and that cologne and something essentially Nathan. Because I don't know how to let go of the fear, of the story I've been telling myself about who I am, of him. Let's start with the fear. Grace set down her tea. What are you actually afraid of? Not the surface level stuff. I'm afraid of marriage. I'm afraid of ending up like my mother. What's underneath that? The question opened something in Olivia's chest. She'd spent 7 years running from this answer, building walls around it, pretending it didn't exist. I'm afraid of disappearing, she said quietly. I'm afraid that if I say yes to Nathan, if I commit completely, I'll stop being Olivia and just become Nathan's wife. That I'll lose myself the way my mother lost herself. Okay, let's examine that. Grace leaned forward. Tell me about a time in the last 7 years when being with Nathan made you feel like you were disappearing. Olivia opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. Because she couldn't think of one. Couldn't think of a single moment when Nathan had asked her to be less than she was, to diminish herself, to choose his needs over her own. He's never, she faltered. He's always supported my career, celebrated my successes, pushed me to take risks I was too scared to take on my own. So where does the fear come from? From watching my mother. The words came slowly. From seeing her give up everything for my father. Her dreams of being a novelist, her passion for literature that all of it sacrificed to be the perfect judge's wife. And from knowing that she chose that cage willingly because she was too afraid to choose the uncertain path. And you think if you marry Nathan, you'll make the same choice. Grace's voice was gentle. But Olivia, you're not choosing safety with Nathan. Your mother married your father because he represented predictability, security, a life without risk. What does Nathan represent to you? Olivia thought about it. About the night at the harbor 7 years ago, when Nathan had sat with her in her pain without trying to fix it. About the way he'd held her when his father died, letting her see him broken and raw. About every moment of vulnerability, every fight, every time they'd had to choose each other through the hard parts. He represents the thing that terrifies me most, she said finally. Being fully known, being seen completely with all my flaws and fears and broken parts, and being loved anyway. And that's more frightening than safety. Yes, Olivia's voice cracked. Because if he sees all of me and still loves me, then I have to believe I'm worthy of that love. And I don't know if I do. The room was silent except for the crackling of the fire. Grace sat back, her expression thoughtful. That's the real fear, isn't it? Not that you'll lose yourself in marriage, that you'll be fully yourself and that will somehow be enough. The truth of it hit Olivia like a physical blow. All these years she'd told herself she was afraid of becoming her mother, of sacrificing her identity for a relationship. But that was a lie. The real fear was simpler and more devastating. She didn't believe she was worth choosing. Didn't believe that the real her, anxious, scared, imperfect, could be enough to build a life with. My mother chose safety because she didn't believe she was brave enough for love, Olivia said slowly. I'm running from Nathan because I don't believe I'm worth the love he's offering. Yes, Grace's voice was soft. And until you address that belief, it won't matter who proposes or how or when. You'll find a reason to say no because you don't believe you deserve to say yes. Olivia pulled Nathan's scarf tighter around her shoulders. So what do I do? You start by asking yourself a different question. Not, am I worthy of Nathan's love? That's his choice to make. Ask yourself, am I willing to be vulnerable enough to accept it? Grace stood, moved to the window, looked out at the snow-covered street. My husband was leaving me when he died. And for years I told myself I was grieving the marriage we could have had. But really I was grieving the fact that I never let him see the real me. I performed being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect therapist. And he was leaving because he'd finally met someone who could be imperfect with him. What was her name? Olivia asked quietly. The woman he was leaving you for. Rebecca, she was his assistant. 28 years old, recently divorced, had a kid from a previous marriage. Grace's smile was sad. Thomas used to come home and tell me about her, about how she'd bring her daughter to work sometimes when childcare fell through, about how she'd cry in the break room when her ex didn't pay child support. And I'd listen and give advice and never once think that what he was really saying was, here's someone who lets me see her struggle. Why can't you? Did you meet her after? At the funeral. She came with her daughter, this little girl in a black dress that was too big, holding Rebecca's hand and crying for a man who'd been kind to her. Grace's voice went rough, and I looked at her and thought, you gave him something I never could, the permission to be human. That's when I knew the marriage had been over long before he decided to leave. Olivia felt tears on her cheeks. I don't know how to do that. Let someone see me struggle. You're doing it right now, Grace turned from the window. With me, with Nathan, with yourself. The question is whether you're brave enough to keep doing it even when it's uncomfortable. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light shift across the room. Finally, Grace spoke again. Can I tell you something that might change how you see your mother? Olivia nodded. Your mother isn't weak for choosing safety. She's weak for staying in a marriage that's been dead for years. Grace's voice was firm. The brave thing, the thing she's never done, is admit the mistake and start over. At 63, she still has time to choose differently. But she won't because she's convinced herself that staying is somehow noble, that enduring is the same as loving. What are you saying? I'm saying you don't have to repeat her story, but you don't have to overcorrect either. Running from commitment because you're afraid of choosing wrong is just another form of staying safe. Grace met Olivia's eyes. The truly brave choice is neither running toward Nathan nor running away from him. It's standing still long enough to figure out what you actually want and then choosing that, whatever it is, with your whole heart. Olivia spent the next 2 days alone. Not hiding, she went to work, attended meetings, finalized plans for the community center's New Year's opening. But she carved out space around herself, turned off her phone, stopped reading her mother's journal, stopped replaying conversations with Nathan in her mind. She just existed, and somewhere in the quiet, something shifted. On December 23rd, she drove to the community center at dawn. The building was finished now, windows gleaming, therapy wing complete, every room designed with intention and hope. She walked through the empty spaces, touching walls she'd specified, standing in light she'd calculated, seeing the manifestation of 2 years of work. The main therapy office, Grace's office, had the windows Olivia had added. Large, positioned to catch morning light, offering a view of the city without overwhelming it. In the corner, someone had left a note. Thank you for building a space where people can be seen. Olivia folded the note carefully, slipped it into her pocket. Then she walked to the community room, the heart of the building designed for gatherings and celebrations and all the messy, beautiful moments of human connection. And stopped. In the center of the room, someone had set up a scale model, not of the community center of an apartment, a beautiful, light-filled apartment with an open floor plan, a kitchen designed for 2 people to cook together, a studio space with north-facing windows, a bedroom that overlooked the harbor. Olivia's hands shook as she moved closer. The model was detailed and professional, clearly the work of an architect. Her work. She recognized the style, the attention to acoustics and light and flow. But she didn't remember designing this. There was a note pinned to the base. Nathan's handwriting. You drew this 2 years ago, night of my 30th birthday while I was sleeping. Found it in your sketchbook when I was looking for graph paper. You'd labeled the rooms kitchen, our studio, yours bedroom, ours office, his. I made it into a model because I wanted you to see what I see, that you've been building a life for us even while you were afraid to admit you wanted one. Olivia sank to the floor. The model in her hands, tears blurring her vision. She remembered that night, remembered Nathan falling asleep on her couch after a grueling shift, remembered sitting up late, unable to sleep, sketching absently while half watching a documentary. She thought she was just doodling, but apparently her subconscious had been designing their future. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through her camera roll until she found it, a photo of that night's sketch. There it was, complete with the labels Nathan had mentioned. Kitchen hours in her handwriting 2 years ago, when she'd still been telling herself she wasn't ready for forever. Her hands had been braver than her heart. Olivia sat on the floor of the empty community room, holding a model of the life she'd been too afraid to build, and finally let herself want it. Not because it was safe or expected or the next logical step, but because it was what she'd been building toward all along, one sketch at a time, one careful decision at a time, one moment of vulnerability at a time. She pulled out her phone, turned it on for the first time in 2 days. 17 missed calls, 32 texts, most from Marcus, some from her mother, 3 from Grace, and 1 from Nathan sent this morning. The community center is beautiful. You built something that will help people heal. I'm proud of you, always have been. Olivia's thumb hovered over his name. She could call, could tell him she'd seen the model, understood what it meant, was ready to talk about their future. But words felt inadequate for what she needed to say. Instead, she texted Marcus, "Is Nathan working today?" The response came immediately. Night shift at Children's, 7 p.m., 7 a.m. "Why, you okay?" Olivia looked at the model in her hands, at the apartment she'd designed, without knowing she was designing it, at the life she'd been building in the margins of her fear. "I'm okay," she texted back. "I just need to tell him something." Olivia had never been inside Nathan's apartment when he wasn't there. She had a key, had one for 4 years, but using it without asking felt like a violation. Still, when she stood outside his building at 9 p.m. on December 23rd, holding the apartment model, in her racing heart, she knew this needed to be here, in his space, waiting for him when he came home from his shift. She let herself in. Nathan's apartment was exactly as she remembered, neat but lived-in, medical journals stacked on the coffee table, photos of his father on the mantle, a blanket she'd given him 2 Christmases ago draped over the couch. It smelled like him, and Olivia had to stop for a moment, just breathing it in, remembering all the mornings she'd woken up here, all the dinners they'd cooked in that tiny kitchen, all the nights they'd fallen asleep tangled together on that too small couch. She set the apartment model on his dining table, then noticed something she'd missed before the table itself. It was covered in blueprints. Not medical charts. Blueprints. Olivia moved closer, her breath catching. They were architectural plans for the apartment in the model. Someone had taken her 2-year-old sketch and developed it into proper construction documents. Floor plans, elevations, electrical layouts, plumbing specs. Professional, detailed, ready to submit for permits. There was a sticky note on top in Nathan's handwriting. "Had an architect friend develop your sketch. Made an offer on the lot overlooking Boston Harbor last month. Was going to surprise you Christmas morning. If you want it, if you're ready." No pressure. Olivia's legs gave out. She sat down hard in one of Nathan's dining chairs, staring at months of planning she'd known nothing about. He'd taken a random sketch she didn't even remember making and turned it into a real place they could live. Had bought land, had plans drawn up, had been building their future while giving her space to decide if she wanted it. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, opened the Photos app, started scrolling. She needed to see it, needed proof that this was real, that she'd been choosing him all along, even when she didn't realize it. There. May 20th, a photo of Nathan at her first gallery opening, standing in front of her architectural renderings, so proud his face was glowing. And in the background, barely visible, one of her sketches, a house with 2 studios, his and hers, connected by a shared garden. July 2023. Nathan asleep on her couch, a pediatrics textbook on his chest. And on the wall behind him, a sketch she didn't remember hanging in a kitchen with 2 of everything. 2 coffee makers, 2 sets of knives, space for 2 people to cook without colliding. December 2023, last Christmas. Nathan giving her a set of colored pencils, professional grade, the kind that cost a fortune. "For when you're ready to draw something that scares you," he'd said. And she'd used them to sketch the apartment model Nathan had found. She'd been building this life for years, had been leaving breadcrumbs for her future self to follow, had been braver in her art than she'd ever let herself be in words. Olivia stood up, walked to Nathan's bedroom, opened the drawer where she knew he kept important documents. His father's death certificate, his medical school diploma, a photo of them from their first anniversary, both of them laughing at something stupid, young and hopeful and having no idea what was coming. And underneath everything, a ring box. Olivia's hand shook as she opened it. The ring was simple, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds set in white gold. Her birthstone. She'd mentioned once years ago that she found traditional engagement rings too expected, preferred something with color. Nathan had remembered. But what made her breath catch was the engraving inside the band, "Choose me, I choose you, 7 years and counting." Not a question, not a demand, just a statement of fact and a promise. Olivia closed the box carefully, put everything back exactly as she'd found it. She had no right to be here looking through Nathan's private things. But now she understood. He'd been ready for 3 years since he learned about their parents, maybe longer. Had been building toward this proposal, buying the ring, developing their apartment plans, giving her every tool she needed to say yes, and waiting, just waiting for her to catch up. She pulled out her phone, composed a text. "I was in your apartment. I'm sorry. I saw the blueprints, saw the ring. I need to tell you something, but I need to do it in person. Can you meet me tomorrow, Christmas Eve? The harbor, 7 p.m. Our bench." She hit send before she could overthink it. The response came immediately. "I'll be there." Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter day where the light was sharp enough to hurt. Olivia spent the morning at her parents' house helping her mother cook dinner for tomorrow. They worked in silence for a while, falling into old rhythms. Catherine peeling potatoes, Olivia chopping vegetables, the kitchen warm and familiar. "You look different," Catherine said finally. "Lighter somehow." Olivia set down her knife. "I figured something out. About me, about Nathan, about what I actually want." Catherine's hands stilled on the potato peeler. "And what do you want?" "Something that terrifies me." Olivia smiled. "Something real and imperfect and completely uncertain. Something that might fail spectacularly but might also be extraordinary." She met her mother's eyes. "I want to choose love, even though I'm scared, especially because I'm scared." Catherine set down the potato, crossed to Olivia, pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "for being braver than I was." "It's not too late for you either," Olivia said into her mother's shoulder, "to choose differently, to be honest with Dad about what you want, what you've always wanted." Catherine pulled back, her eyes bright with tears. "I know. Grace said the same thing. Did I mention? She called me, suggested we have coffee talk about some things." She laughed shakily. "At 63, apparently, I'm finally going to therapy." "Good," Olivia squeezed her mother's hand. "You deserve to be happy, not safe. Happy." They finished cooking in a different kind of silence, not the hollow kind that had marked Olivia's childhood, but the comfortable kind that came from finally being honest with each other. At 6:45 p.m., Olivia stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to decide if she was dressed appropriately for potentially getting engaged. She'd changed clothes 4 times, finally settling on jeans and the sweater Nathan had given her last Christmas, soft gray cashmere that he'd said matched her eyes. Her phone buzzed. "Grace, whatever happens tonight, you're already brave for showing up. Proud of you." Then her mother, "Choose yourself first, then choose him. In that order. Love you." Then Marcus. "IDK, what's happening?" But Nathan just left the hospital looking like he's either going to a wedding or a funeral. "Good luck," Olivia laughed despite her nerves. She grabbed Nathan's scarf, the one she'd been carrying for days, and headed out into the December night. The harbor was quiet, most people home preparing for Christmas. The bench where they'd first met, where Nathan had almost proposed 5 days ago, was empty, waiting. Olivia sat down, pulled the scarf tighter, watched the water, and tried to calm her racing heart. Nathan arrived at 7:02, slightly breathless, like he'd been running. He was dressed in dark jeans and a coat she'd given him, his hair slightly messy from the wind. He looked nervous and hopeful, and so completely Nathan that Olivia had to fight the urge to cross the distance and kiss him immediately. "Hi," he said, sitting down beside her but not touching. "Hi." Olivia's voice was steadier than she expected. "Thanks for coming." "Always." The word was simple but weighted with 7 years of showing up. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the boats, watching their breath form clouds in the cold air. Olivia could feel Nathan's tension, could practically hear him wondering what she was going to say, whether this was goodbye or something else. I broke into your apartment, she said finally. Nathan's eyes widened. You what? Well, not broke in. I have a key, but I went when you weren't there. Saw the blueprints, the apartment plans. She turned to face him. Why didn't you tell me you had been developing them? Nathan's jaw tightened. Because I didn't want you to feel pressured. I wanted you to choose me because you wanted to, not because I'd already built a future for us. And the land, the lot overlooking the harbor. I was going to tell you Christmas morning. Was going to give you the blueprints and the deed and tell you it was ours if you wanted it. That we could build it together, design it exactly how we wanted, or we could sell it and do something else entirely. Whatever you were ready for. His voice went rough. But then you found your mother's journal and everything fell apart. Olivia reached into her bag, pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. I brought you something. Nathan took the package, carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a framed sketch, the apartment design from 2 years ago, the one Olivia had drawn without knowing she was drawing it. But she'd done something to it, had drawn two figures in the living room, abstract but clearly meant to be them. One sitting at an easel, one reading on the couch, existing in the same space, separate but connected. I drew this 2 years ago, Olivia said quietly, but I added the figures last night because I realized I've been building a life with you in my head for years, even while I was too afraid to build it in reality. And I'm tired of being afraid. Nathan's hands trembled slightly on the frame. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been looking at this wrong. I thought my choice was between safety and risk, between my mother's life and some undefined alternative. But that's not the choice at all. Olivia turned to face him fully. The choice is between living half alive because I'm too scared to be vulnerable, or choosing to be fully myself with someone who sees all of me and loves me anyway. Live. Wait, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I found something else in your apartment, in your nightstand. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I did, and I saw. Her voice broke. The ring, the engraving. Choose me, I choose you. Nathan's eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with emotion. I had it made 3 months ago. Been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. But every time I got close to asking, I could see the panic in your eyes, and I'd back off because I love you too much to trap you into something you're not ready for. I'm ready now, Olivia whispered. Not because I'm not scared, I'm terrified, but because I finally understand that the fear isn't a warning. It's just love protecting itself. And I'm tired of letting fear make my choices. Nathan set down the framed sketch, carefully like it was made of glass. So what happens now? Olivia pulled something else from her bag, a keyring with 2 keys. This is the key to a storage unit in Cambridge. I've been renting it for a year. Inside, there are 16 sketchbooks full of designs for our apartment, for our life, for all the things I've been too scared to say out loud. And there's something else. What? A scale model. The real one, the one I made 6 months ago based on those blueprints you had drawn up. I don't know how I knew about them. Maybe I saw them once when I was here and forgot. Maybe it was coincidence. But I made it because even when I was pushing you away, some part of me was still building toward us. Nathan's breath caught. You made a model of our apartment, of our home. Olivia's voice was steady now. Because that's what it is. Not just an apartment or a building or a structure. It's a home we've been designing together for 7 years. One choice at a time, one sketch at a time, one moment of showing up at a time. Nathan stood abruptly, turned away, and for a terrible moment, Olivia thought she'd misread everything, thought he was leaving. But then she saw his shoulders shaking, saw him press his hands to his face, and she realized he was crying. She went to him, put her hand on his back. Nathan. He turned and his face was wet with tears, but he was smiling. I thought I'd lost you. When you pushed me away after finding that journal, I thought this was it, that your fear had finally won. And I told myself I'd wait as long as it took, but God live, I was so scared that it would take forever. I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Nathan cupped her face with both hands. Don't apologize for taking the time you needed to figure out what you wanted. You weren't running from me, you were running toward yourself, and that's exactly what you needed to do. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync, the harbor quiet around them. I saw your ring, Olivia said finally, and I have something to say about that. Nathan's breath hitched. Okay, you're not allowed to propose to me. He pulled back, confusion and hurt flashing across his face. What? Not yet. Olivia smiled through her tears. Because I have something to give you first, and I don't want your proposal to overshadow it. She pulled out a small box from her coat pocket. Not a ring box, something different. Nathan took it with shaking hands, opened it. Inside was a key, ornate, antique-looking, clearly not for any door that existed yet. It's symbolic, Olivia explained. For the apartment, for the life we're going to build. I'm giving you the key because I want you to know I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us with all the fear and uncertainty and beautiful, terrifying vulnerability that comes with it. She took a breath. And in 6 months, when we've laid the foundation and started building, when I've proven to both of us that I can show up for this without running away, then you can ask me, and I'll say yes. Nathan stared at her, the key in his palm, his eyes searching her face. 6 months. 6 months, Olivia confirmed. Long enough to prove I'm not making this choice out of panic or pressure or trying to fix my parents' story. Long enough to build something real from the ground up, literally and figuratively. Short enough that I don't lose my nerve. And what happens in those 6 months? We break ground on the apartment. We see Grace together, proper couples counseling, so we learn how to be vulnerable without running away. We tell our families. We design the life we actually want instead of the one we think we're supposed to have. Olivia's voice went soft. And we practice being brave together instead of me being brave alone. Nathan closed his hand around the key, then pulled Olivia into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. 6 months, he whispered into her hair. I can do 6 months. I can do forever if that's what you need. 6 months is enough. Olivia held him just as tightly. Because I'm not afraid anymore. Not of marriage, not of commitment, not of you. I'm just afraid of wasting any more time not building the life I actually want. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other under the December stars, letting the fear and the hope and the love tangle together into something stronger than either could be alone. Finally, Nathan pulled back enough to see her face. Can I at least show you the ring? I've been carrying it around for 3 months, and it's killing me not to let you see it. Olivia laughed. Okay, but just to look, not to propose. Nathan pulled the box from his pocket, the same one Olivia had seen in his apartment. He opened it, and the sapphire caught the light from the harbor lamps, throwing blue fire across his hands. It's perfect, Olivia breathed. How did you know? Because I've been paying attention for 7 years. Nathan smiled. You mentioned once that you loved colored stones better than diamonds, that your grandmother had a sapphire ring you used to play with as a kid, that if you ever got engaged, you'd want something that felt like you, not like everyone else. He traced the engraving with his thumb. Choose me, I choose you, because that's what we've been doing all along. Olivia looked at the ring, at the physical manifestation of 7 years of careful attention and patient love. Can I try it on just to see Liv? Not as an engagement, just as a promise, a placeholder for 6 months from now. Nathan's hand shook slightly as he took the ring from the box. Which finger? Right hand. Olivia held out her right hand and Nathan slid the ring onto her fourth finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably measured one of her other rings months ago, paid attention in that quiet way he had. Olivia held up her hand, watching the sapphire catch the light. In 6 months, you can move it to my left hand, after we've laid the foundation, after we've started building something real. 6 months, Nathan agreed. Then softer. Can I at least practice the asking part? Nathan, please, I've been rehearsing for 3 months. Let me at least say it once, even if the official asking doesn't happen until June. Olivia's heart was hammering, but she nodded. Nathan took both her hands, looked into her eyes with an intensity that made her dizzy. Olivia Bennett, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Not because you're perfect, you're not, and neither am I, but because you keep showing up. Keep choosing vulnerability even when it terrifies you. Keep building beautiful things out of fear and hope and love. His voice went rough. I've spent 7 years learning how to be brave enough for you, learning how to be patient, how to give you space, how to love you without trapping you. And now I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to build a home with you, not a perfect one, not a safe one, but a real one where we can both be completely ourselves. Olivia was crying now, couldn't stop even if she wanted to. That was really good. Nathan laughed through his own tears. I know. That's why you have to say yes in 6 months. I can't peak like this and have it be for nothing. They stood together in the cold, the ring on Olivia's right hand catching the light, the promise of 6 months stretching before them like a blueprint waiting to be built. It wasn't the traditional engagement story. No surprise proposal, no getting down on one knee, no immediate yes. But it was theirs, messy and honest and exactly right. We should go, Nathan said eventually. It's freezing out here. Where your place, my place, doesn't matter. He pulled her close again. I just want to be somewhere warm with you. They walked back to the parking lot hand in hand, and Olivia felt lighter than she had in weeks. The fear was still there, would probably always be there, but it wasn't making her choices anymore. She was. At her car, Nathan stopped her. Wait, I have something for you too. He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. I was going to give this to you tomorrow, but it feels like tonight is the right time. Olivia opened it. Inside was a deed for the lot overlooking Boston Harbor, but it had both their names on it, dated yesterday. I added your name, Nathan explained, because even if you said no, even if you never wanted to build that apartment, I wanted you to have the land. So you'd always have a place to build something, anything if you decided you wanted to. He shrugged. Seemed like a better gift than another scarf. Olivia laughed and cried at the same time, clutching the deed that meant he'd been preparing for her no as carefully as her yes. You are absurdly, unreasonably wonderful. I know, it's very inconvenient. Nathan kissed her forehead. So, your place or mine? Yours. I want to see those blueprints properly. Start planning what 6 months of foundation building looks like. They drove separately, but Olivia could see Nathan's car in her rearview mirror the whole way, steady and present and exactly where he'd always been, right there waiting for her to be ready. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Olivia woke in Nathan's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows, his arm around her waist and his breath warm against her neck. She looked at her right hand at the sapphire ring that wouldn't move to her left hand for 6 more months and felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, not fearlessness, just the quiet knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her mother, Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Your father and I need to talk to you later. Some decisions we've made. Grace helped us see some things clearly. Love you. Then Grace, Merry Christmas. Proud of you for choosing courage. See you in January for that first couples session. Then Marcus. Christmas miracle, the mayor wants to move the community center opening to New Year's Eve instead of New Year's Day. Means we get more press coverage. You in? Also, you're glowing in that photo Nathan just posted, so I'm assuming last night went well. Olivia opened Instagram. Nathan had posted a photo from last night, the two of them at the harbor bench. Her holding the framed sketch she'd given him, both of them laughing at something. The caption, 7 years of choosing each other. Here's to the next 7, and the 7 after that, and all the ones that come after. Building something real. Olivia's heart swelled. She turned in Nathan's arms and he stirred, blinked awake, smiled when he saw her. Merry Christmas, he mumbled, still half asleep. Merry Christmas. She held up her right hand, the ring catching the morning light. 6 months. 6 months, he agreed, then more awake. But we're starting today, breaking ground on the foundation, even if it's just metaphorical for now. Deal. Olivia kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. But first coffee and breakfast. And I want to look at those blueprints again, because I think the studio needs more natural light. Nathan laughed. You're already redesigning. I'm an architect. It's what I do. She climbed out of bed, pulled on one of his t-shirts. Besides, if we're going to build this life together, I want it to be exactly right. Not perfect, not safe, just right for us. They spent Christmas morning, sprawled across Nathan's dining table, blueprints spread everywhere, coffee growing cold, as they argued about window placement and kitchen islands, and whether the bedroom needed direct harbor views or if waking up to see the city would be enough. They sketched and refined and designed building their home on paper, while the foundation for the real thing waited for spring. At noon, Olivia's phone rang. Her father. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Richard's voice was careful. "Your mother said you might be with Nathan today. Is that true?" "Yes, Dad, we're at his place." A pause. "Good, that's good. Listen, I need to tell you something, and I'd rather do it before you come over later." He took a breath. "Your mother and I are separating." Olivia's hand tightened on the phone. Nathan looked up from the blueprints, concerned. "What? We've been talking, really talking for the first time in 40 years. Grace Lawson has been helping us see things clearly." Richard's voice was thick with emotion. "And we've realized we've been living parallel lives for too long. We love each other, but we're not in love, and we haven't been for a very long time. Maybe never were." "Dad, it's okay, Liv. It's more than okay. It's honest, finally." He laughed shaky. "Your mother wants to write again. Did you know that wants to take writing classes, maybe work on that novel she gave up on 40 years ago? And I want to travel, see the world, do all the things I never did because I was busy building security." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "Are you divorcing?" "Eventually, probably, but for now we're just figuring out how to be ourselves again." Richard's voice went soft. "You helped us see that. You and Nathan choosing each other honestly instead of safely. It made us realize what we'd been missing." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll still come for Christmas dinner. Say you'll bring Nathan. Say you'll help us figure out how to do this without destroying everything we built together." "Of course, Dad, of course." They talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. Olivia stared at her phone, trying to process everything. "Your parents are splitting up," Nathan asked gently. "Yeah." Olivia looked at him, this man who'd waited 7 years for her to be ready, who'd built foundations while she was still designing doors. "Is it terrible that I'm relieved for them?" "No, it means they're finally being honest." Nathan pulled her into his lap, held her while she processed. "Change is scary, but it's better than slow suffocation." They sat like that for a while, holding each other, understanding that sometimes the bravest thing was admitting a mistake and starting over. Even at 63, even after 40 years. Christmas dinner at the Bennett house was strange and beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. Catherine had cooked too much food the way she always did. Richard was quieter than usual, but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. And the three of them, Olivia, Nathan, and both her parents, sat around the table and talked honestly for the first time in Olivia's memory. Catherine told stories about her college dreams, about the novel she'd started writing and abandoned. Richard talked about always wanting to see the Northern Lights, to hike Machu Picchu, to do something adventurous, before he was too old to enjoy it. And Olivia and Nathan shared their plans for the apartment, for the 6-month engagement period, for building something real instead of safe. "I'm proud of you," Catherine said, at the end of the night, hugging Olivia tightly, "for being braver than I was, for choosing love even when it scared you." "I learned it from you, Olivia said. "You're choosing it now, too. Better late than never." As they drove home through the snowy streets, Nathan reached over and took Olivia's right hand, his thumb rubbing over the sapphire ring. "6 months," he said again. "6 months," Olivia confirmed, "and then you can ask me properly. And you'll say yes." She looked at him, at his profile in the streetlight, at the man who'd spent 7 years learning how to love her without caging her, at the future. They were building one honest choice at a time. "I'll say yes, not because I'm not scared, but because I'm more scared of not building this life with you." Nathan brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles just above the ring. "That's good enough for me." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the kind that came from finally being honest with each other and themselves. When they got home, Nathan's apartment for now, but soon their home would be ready. They went back to the blueprints, kept designing, kept building. Because that's what love was, not the grand gesture, not the perfect proposal, not the fairy tale ending. It was the everyday choice to show up, to be vulnerable, to keep building even when you were scared. It was two people with their own blueprints deciding to combine them into something stronger than either could make alone. It was December turning to January, foundations being laid a life, being built one honest choice at a time. And 6 months from now, when Nathan moved that ring to her left hand and asked her to marry him for real, Olivia would say yes. Not because the fear had disappeared, but because she'd learned that love was worth being afraid for. But that was 6 months away. Tonight on Christmas night, they were just two people bent over blueprints designing a home building, a life choosing each other with their whole hearts, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.